So we have all these systems that we train our teachers to do. So even if the teacher maybe doesn't naturally have that, we have it in place for them, exactly what to do at each step. But like I said, it starts in kindergarten. I mean, it starts with where do you park your pencil and what do you have out when we're working. You only have the tools out and then you put things away. And well, if you want to get them out correctly next time, you have to put them back in the right space.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Shane Saxon.
Welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm seated with three friends, Paul Schaefer and Tanya, you all know well. And most of you probably know Tara Luce as well. Just she hasn't been on the podcast yet. So Tara, thanks for joining us. You're the head of the lower school
Correct.
At the Hounside School Spring Meadow campus. How long have you been in HLS?
I have been a parent. So my daughter graduated in 2020. So all that time, K to 12. And then I think I've been in the classroom or out of the classroom in this role for 12 years.
Oh.
12 years.
She's very old.
Wow.
Ouch, right off the bat.
So Tara, what did you do before you were a teacher at HLS?
I stayed at home with my kids. I actually came to be a teacher because I was at the end of the year picnic. And Mrs. Tiemann walked up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about being a teacher?"
Yeah.
And I laughed out loud. And I said, "Oh, no." And she said, "Why don't you come and talk to me?" And I said, "Okay." So I showed up with no resume, no anything, just thought we were going to talk about how great teaching is. Left with the job.
Nice. Yeah. It's kind of a common theme around here. You know, our very rigorous hiring process of asking moms.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's how I got there. Yeah. Paul just showed up as a former student. One day there he was.
I think that had to have been the same year that you were hired because I'm in my 12th year as well. And I applied with an actual resume. Wow. And I was told, no, we don't need you.
You were?
I was. Yes.
I didn't know that.
And then a few weeks later, Mrs. Lowe emailed me because she'd been copied on the email. Like I got an initial response from the school that said no. And then Mrs. Lowe emailed me and said, actually, we do need you. Would you come in for an interview?
Wow. Mrs. Lowe.
Hey there, it's Shane. Just saying thank you for joining us on this episode of Classical Etc. If you like our conversations here on the show or any of our other videos on classical education, homeschooling, and great books of the Western world, then you're in the perfect spot. Liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel makes sure that these conversations get to you every week. It's great to have you here. Now let's get back to the episode. So we want to take advantage of Tara's expertise and unpack a very difficult question, which is how do you transition students to more independence in school? But before we get there, Tara, I don't know if you knew this, but we have a time-honored tradition of talking about what we've read because that's all we really want to do. And then we talk about the content just as a matter of making the show. But Paul, let me ask you this. What have you been reading recently?
I have been reading nothing other than the Book of Nature. But what I'm going to read, I was very excited. My wife...
This is aspirational.
This is aspirational. That's right. She was at Half Price Books, I don't know, selling some of our books, which I didn't even have the heart to ask what got given away. But she, for 71 cents, because she had the credit and she paid 71 cents, right. She got me another Graham Greene novel, The 10th Man. And I'm very excited about this.
I've never heard of that.
I hadn't either. And she was like, have you heard of this? And she actually, it was recommended by a friend that I got started on Graham Greene. And then he saw Sarah and he mentioned, hey, tell Paul I've read this book. And then she went to the bookstore, saw it, and grabbed it for me. But it's about a man in a concentration camp who gets sentenced to death, but then like offers, somehow brokers a deal where somebody takes his place. And then he has to live the rest of his life living with that.
Oh, wow.
And so it sounds like a very interesting, but heavy book. But you know, it's Graham Greene. Like he's lots of moral quandaries. And so I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to get me back on the reading train. Nice.
I wonder if we should do that for our MP book group. It sounds good.
Well,
it sounds like a good discussion book.
Yes, I think it would be a very good discussion book. But I have yet to start page 1. So I will let you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the opposite of Paul in that I've just been on a reading tear recently. I'm going to tell you guys about it.
You must not be as busy as Paul.
Well, probably not. No. So I've read 5 books, I think, or finished 5 books since the last time that we sat down to do this. When was the last time we did this?
Have you been working?
A little
What's
bit.
he doing at his desk?
He hasn't been at his desk much.
There you
He's
go.
been at the warehouse.
Sitting in his car reading.
So, okay. One of my favorite books in the world I reread recently, and that's the memoir of Eugene Peterson. Have you guys ever heard of Eugene Peterson?
I've heard of Eugene Peterson, but I didn't know he had a memoir.
It's a memoir. It's called Pastor. Very
Okay.
good. Reread it. And then a second book I read is there's a professor at my church named Greg Allison who wrote a book called on the Holy Spirit called God, Gift, and Guide. And he came to my house and he gave it to me.
Oh.
So I read it. It's really good. I read Eusebius' church history.
Oh,
guys read
gosh.
this?
My goodness.
You tore through that?
It's like 300 pages,
Yeah.
but it was really good. Here's the illustration of why it's good. If you like meet like friends of your parents when you're an adult and they tell you a story about your parents that you had never heard before,
Yes.
Mhm.
and it kind of casts your parents in a new light. That's how I felt hearing about like Philip the Apostle and all the stories from after the
Oh,
New Testament era
really?
that I
That was
didn't know.
very
I'm like,
personal.
well, it's just like, these are characters I know from the Bible, but I didn't know
These
like,
things about
yeah.
them.
So that was great. And then I read All the Live Little Things by Wallace Stegner.
I haven't read that.
Yeah, all the
All
live
the
little
live
little things. Yeah,
Is it good?
it was great. I
Yeah.
love Wallace Stegner.
I do too. We should read Wallace Stegner. He's very good.
You all were talking about this in podcast a few weeks ago, and I just like shut my mouth because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wallace Stegner I don't know if he was the chair, but he was the writing professor at Stanford that Wendell Berry and Ken Kesey and Larry McMurtry were all a part of. Ernest Gaines were all
I think
a
I
part of.
recognize two of those names, but keep going.
Ernest Gaines wrote the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman.
Doesn't
Do you know
help me.
that? Okay. Well, he's
This
worth
is-
reading.
This is why when I started here, Martin made a comment which he's never lived up to, but he made a comment that he tries not to read a book where the author hasn't been dead for 50 years. And I have found in my life that I actually, living according to that rule, I'm very happy. And so, except for Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is my one exception.
Okay. Well, Ernest Gaines should be an exception too. He
Okay.
should be an exception.
Well, I will need a list.
Oh,
from
didn't you
all.
read A Lesson Before Dying?
No,
Oh,
I think I bowed out on that one.
oh my
Well,
goodness.
let's hope that you don't die soon.
So
You've got some things to learn.
So you need to start reading.
I hope you feel ashamed by my testimony right now.
I do. I feel very ashamed.
So was that 4 or was that 5?
So then the other one is I finished N.T. Wright's second volume, Jesus and the Victory of God. I've been
My
working on it for a
goodness,
long time.
you've been reading a
But
lot of
I have.
heavy stuff.
I have. It's been great. I've been enjoying
Okay.
it. And then and right now I'm in the middle of Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner.
Oh, I like Angle of Repose.
It's a lot. It's a little longer.
I can't remember
It'll
it.
take me a little longer, but
Yeah.
yeah. And I started City of God. So those are the two books I'm
Oh
reading
my
right now. Guys, I've just been killing it.
You are making the rest of us look ridiculous.
This
I want
is
to go
not normal
first
for me
next time.
So I'm on a hot streak right now. It's like I feel like I'm hitting every shot in basketball, and so I just wanted to soak it up while I could.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Tony, what about you? What have you been
yeah.
doing?
Well, I read a British murder mystery by an author that I'd never read before called Ellie Griffiths, and her protagonist is an archaeologist in Norfolk, which is apparently very cold, wet, and windy. And I enjoyed it. I would read more of her books, but I read it because I heard it recommended on a podcast. Or I heard this series recommended, and I always have to start with the first book. So then I will read the next. I will continue reading just to see do they get better, because you really can't judge an author on their first book.
Sure.
But it was interesting enough that I would read another one. But now I'm reading this book that I'm sure nobody's ever heard of, called The Undelivered Martyr. And so Dave was reading it, my husband. And I said, "What is this? It looks like a crazy book." And he said that Wendell Berry sent it to him and wanted him to read it. And so, does anybody know what a martel is?
No.
It's like a gossip, like a piece of gossip.
Oh.
That's like another word for it. But so this guy lives in, I can't even, Leatheringham. I don't know where that is. But
So set in England.
it is set in England, and he's a priest, and he was asked to deliver a martel. It's really like a community lecture series kind of thing. So he went because he'd never been to one of these events before. So he went, and a woman talked about making the frontal piece for an altar and all that was involved in that and the story of it. So he knew then what it was. And his was supposed to be on this little church out on a farm. And he had a heart attack before he could deliver it. And so he wrote down, this is his martel that he would have delivered. So I've only read 35 pages, and it's really, he's just talking about church life in a small country church and building the actual building of the church way back centuries ago. And it's really good. It's very interesting, but I just would never. I mean, would you ever pick up a book called The Undelivered Martel?
Oh.
I mean, you just have no idea what it means, what it is. I feel like nobody's ever heard of this before, and I'm not sure how Wendell got hold of it.
That cover looks like it's a recent book. I mean, it looks nicely
It
designed
is. I
and
mean,
laid
this
out.
is like 2006. The guy had the heart attack. So
this was a true story, and this is just the lecture he had prepared.
Yes.
Oh wow! I thought,
but it went bigger than this. So he asked if he could. He asked, I guess, the community, if he could just write it, if they would mind if he just wrote it down. And then he mentions in here, which I can't remember where it was, but he mentions Kenneth Clark, and I'm thinking, is that Kenneth Clark?
Tell us,
He says
tell us who
further
Kenneth
east-
Clark is.
Kenneth Clark is, oh no, he died. He lived past 60. I don't know. I'm thinking Kenneth Clark of the History of Civilization videos that we had to watch in college. That
you had to watch in college.
That I had to watch in college, yes.
I vaguely remember those.
Kenneth Clark. Have you never watched
No, I
them?
never have.
They're really good. They are good. They're just, at the time, I wasn't impressed. But now, looking back, I think I should have paid better attention. Martin loves Kenneth Clark. If Martin were here, he would be.
You miss Martin?
I miss him so much, but I've talked to him all weekend long. You know, he's in the Netherlands.
Oh, wow.
His luggage got lost.
Oh, no.
And so he had to deliver his first speech in his traveling clothes. He said from now on, he's going to travel with his toiletries in his speaking clothes when he goes on an overseas trip.
With most people, I would think when they say their luggage got lost, that means like it went to the wrong location. With Martin, it may have been he forgot what it looks like by the time he arrived there.
It could be,
you know?
but it truly did get lost. But once he got back to the airport to get it, so he had to drive all the way back to the airport. And I don't know how far that was, but it took 2 hours for the airport to find it. And then he had to be driven back to the castle where he's staying for this colloquium he's a part of. So he's had an exciting time.
Wow. Now, Tara, what have you been reading recently? And I know almost never finish 5 books. It's only happened 10 to 12 times this year.
Please.
Sure.
Usually he's reading the same book for a month.
Well, I remember the motorcycle
Yeah.
maintenance one, so I'm holding on to that. School just started, so mostly
Right.
I've been reading syllabi, rosters, and schedules. But I am a couple of chapters into The River of Doubt by Candace Millard. It's the story of after Teddy Roosevelt loses his third bid as president, how he deals with loss and defeat is always to go out and punish himself in some way. And he goes to the Amazon.
That's a fascinating story.
It's great. It starts off, the very first chapter of the prologue is Teddy Roosevelt dying on the floor of the jungle. He's starving. He's got a fever, 105. Spoilers, he makes it out. He doesn't die till much later, like 1919. And then the next chapter is him giving this rousing speech in Madison Square Garden that he will lose the election shortly after. And then he goes back to Oyster Bay and he's just devastated. So what he does is just go do the harshest thing he can think of to deal with his defeat. It is. It's so far so good. It's quite dark.
It's gonna be interesting though to see how it lightens
Yes.
along his path, along that journey. Does that work to just punish yourself? Would do something totally different, and then do you then find peace? Is he going to find peace in the journey? You can let us know. When you come back, can let us know.
No, I will send you all an email because I won't ever come back. But it does. It even talks about how he had asthma as a child, devastating, life-threatening asthma. But he just fought through it. I mean, he just became a boxer, and his dad just pushed him and said, your mind is great, but your body is weak. And he decided never to be weak again. So, and then when he lost his first wife, he went to the Badlands. So this is just how he deals with darkness and depression.
Can I just say though, she says she'll never come back. It's not because she doesn't like us. It's because she just has this terrible stage fright that she struggles with. But she likes us a lot.
I do. I think I'm friends with everybody on the podcast. Like Mitchell, I think we're closer friends than we are because I watch the podcast every Monday. And then I want to go talk to him about the stuff I heard. And I think we're best friends, and we're probably not.
I mean,
so
Mitch
I like
could use
you
a
all.
couple of best friends.
Okay.
So I think you'd be open
I'll
to
sign
that.
up. I'll sign up.
So let's transition to our topic. So Tara, help us to understand. There is this large transition that occurs when students move from middle school to upper school. What age are the students, and what is the main challenge that, as you guys talk about this topic, you're like, oh, that is a tough thing for students to go through, for schools to navigate. Help us to understand the problem, the conundrum for someone who maybe doesn't have the kind of experience you have leading a school.
Well, there are a couple of good transitions. There's that primary to grammar school transition. So we're always working to prepare students because grades are no longer subjective. They're not pluses and minuses. They have to study for real tests. They have comprehensive finals. Organization.
All that stuff is stuff in the grammar school that's not in primary.
Yes. So
And
that's
what's the age?
That is
grade?
2nd to 3rd grade. So then we go on to 6th grade, moving into 7th grade in the upper school. And I think that transition is all of those other things. More responsibility, more falls on the student to be prepared with. But also what you get going from 6th grade to 7th grade is you're leaving a self-contained classroom where you are responsible to one teacher for 8 hours a day. And that teacher is responsible to you. So they get to know you. They have the opportunity, if you're not organized in Latin in the morning, they give you another chance at math to get your things out and to get ready. And that's not what you're going to see when you go to 7th grade because you have 6 or 7 teachers that are going to come in and out. And they're great. I mean, they have high expectations, but they may not all have the same expectations. Homework may be different on how you turn it in. Or what do you do if you don't have something prepared? So I think we have to work really hard to look ahead and know what they're going to be asked to do in upper school. It's kind of like Mrs. Lowe's curriculum where she starts at 12th and walks back. We have to start with 12th and what we want our students to do and walk it back. So what's important in 6th grade that they know? Okay, so to be able to do those things, what do they have to be ready to do in 5th? And it goes all the way back to kindergarten. I mean, we start the transition in kindergarten.
Well, Tanya, as you think about this transition, are there any other difficulties that you can think of that students have moving from specifically 6th to 7th grade?
I think the biggest transition problem is 2nd to 3rd, actually, that we've seen in our market of not our school necessarily, because I think we got it kind of figured out with all the experience that we've had. But I think that students and teachers in other schools who maybe haven't used our curriculum very long, and homeschoolers, that jump from 2nd to 3rd seems huge, with more subjects and actual grading, which Tara mentioned, which is new. Taking tests in every subject is new. That to me is the biggest jump. But from 6th to 7th, then is another big jump, because not only do they have a new teacher every time, but they also have to be responsible within that 70-minute class period. They've got to get their homework written down. Whereas if you're in the self-contained classroom in the 6th grade, you've got all day to get your homework written down. But here, that teacher's going away and another teacher's coming in. So that's a big transition. And the way that we teach, the way that these teachers teach is big. When they've been, and not all grammar schools have self-contained classrooms like we do. It was really important to Cheryl that the students have one teacher. So the only time our students have a different teacher all the way through 6th grade is Latin, possibly. And PE and music and art. But other than that, it is that one teacher. So to get used to all those different teachers, and I think the struggle for my children when they made that transition was recognizing that different teachers have different requests of them. Some teachers want very concise answers, and other teachers want fluffy answers that with lots of words and good complex sentences and things like that. I think and some teachers are going to really prepare you for a test by hand-holding more than others who are just going to say, study your notes. Here's your test. And getting used to all of that is a real adjustment.
Oh. So, Paul, these first few weeks of school for 7th grade, let me ask you this. Who is it more difficult for? The students, the teachers, or the administrators? Those first 4 weeks of 7th grade?
I don't want to answer that because it's all of the above, right? I mean, everybody struggles. And, I just think back, Tanya was reminding me before the podcast of the first year that I taught at Highlands. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade, and I had no idea that we had intentional, stair stepping when it came to responsibility and what would be expected, right? But I did. I mean, I was at least cognizant enough to know that these kids were coming from a self-contained classroom to one that wasn't. And it was also very clear that the way the school was structured was 7th grade was you were in upper school. And so given that, I was like, if you're in upper school, then therefore you need to start taking responsibility. And and I honestly didn't know what they had been required of in 6th grade, but you could very clearly see that habits were still being enforced at the end of 6th grade. And so they come into 7th grade and they want to know exactly what is the right answer. They're expecting their notebooks to be checked. They're expecting all of this stuff, right? But at the same time, we didn't have good locker systems. And so like the door of the cabinets were always just like open and stuff spilling out. And so, it was trying to help kids go, look, like you need to have I know you have probably too little space to have all your books, but you need to make sure that's orderly. And then it was, okay, now you need to, I'm not going to tell you every day to pull out your agenda and write down your homework, but I am going to make very clear what your homework is. So then helping them through that. But I started both the 7th graders and the 8th graders just with a whole talk about you are responsible now. And I'm not going to hold your hand. I am going to do notebook checks, but it's going to be a lot less frequent than what you had because I can't fully let that scaffolding drop from one year to the next. So you've got like all of those practical things, but then you also have sort of the kind of engagement with the material you're looking for. So your upper school teachers are naturally, especially in the humanities, are going to be looking for more, for deeper responses than purely comprehension questions. And those kids coming out of 5th, 6th grade, they're very used to, even though the teachers have been trying to prime them for this, they still think that they can get hundreds if they just say what the right answer is. And, and so there's an intentional part in 7th and 8th grade, especially in the humanities, to start saying, well, why? Show me that, or what are you pulling that from? Or if we're going to assert this, why are we asserting this? And for the students to start thinking more deeply. And in that year, I just start seeing light bulbs go off, and and every kid kind of hits at a different time. But
that's because we've prepared them so well
100%.
In primary and grammar school to actually be ready for that. But we have to ask that of them.
Mm-hmm. If they didn't have the habits of exactly knowing what the right answer was, like basic comprehension, there's no way we ever could have got those light bulbs to turn on.
That's right.
Of now, what of it?
We have prepped them, but then the middle school teacher has to then be ready to move them toward that next step. because they're not going to go willingly.
So that's what I want to unpack is how we actually transition them. So maybe we start with what you're saying to teachers. Tara, how do you coach teachers? I'm imagining some teachers are less cognizant of this responsibility than others. So how do you encourage them to grow in their ability to help students be more independent?
I think we have a system in place that so even highlighting, in third grade, we're going to highlight everything for them. Fourth grade, we're not going to highlight in literature.
You mean the things that are going to be on the test, the
Yes.
things they need to know
Yes.
in the study guide.
Yeah, so they're actual tests. So then fifth grade, less. Sixth grade, no highlighting. Things like homework. They start writing down their homework in first grade in an agenda. In first grade, it's a composition notebook, but they get the regular agenda in second grade. So then they're responsible for that. So first through fifth grade, they're going to just look up at the wall and all their homework's going to be written there. And they're given a time. Get out your agenda, go ahead and write your homework. Well, in sixth grade, because seventh grade teachers are going to do homework in a different way, we ask our sixth grade teachers to write their homework after each lesson, mimicking what they're going to see in seventh grade. So we have all these systems that we train our teachers to do. So even if the teacher maybe doesn't naturally have that, we have it in place for them, exactly what to do at each step. But like I said, it starts in kindergarten. I mean, it starts with where do you park your pencil and what do you have out when we're working? You only have the tools out and then you put things away. And well, if you want to get them out correctly next time, you have to put them back in the right space. So I think it's just in our expectation and routines from kindergarten on. But we do give those systems to teachers so that we can see where those students are heading and they are prepared. And we feel really responsible we feel really, not responsible. A word.
What are you talking about?
We feel that we are responsible to the next group of teachers, that they can hold us accountable.
Responsible is the word.
Yes. That they need to be able to look back and see all that we've done and be able to use that for their good in upper school. But we also feel like upper school is responsible to us.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All that training and time we've put in, pencil grip and legible cursive, that has to be, withheld or held up all the way through upper school. Manners, lunchroom etiquette, all of those things. So I think it does take communication between lower school and upper school as well.
This kind of reminds me of when I played football 400 years ago.
Gosh, he loves these sports analogies.
And I played on defense, and we would always be so mad when the offense was turning the ball over we were like, you have a responsibility to us to score some points so that we can win this game.
There it is.
Great illustration.
And did they have a responsibility to you to defend them?
Yeah, we were supposed to prevent there from being points on the board. Yeah.
You weren't actually defending the offense.
Right.
That'd be a lot of players on the field.
Didn't you have a book one point that explained football?
I do. I guess I need to reread it.
She does.
So Tony, what other things have you tried to implement as you're coaching teachers specifically towards this transition?
One of the big things is for the teachers to recognize that, yes, the students have been trained. It just kills me when like a high school teacher says, well, I can't believe the grammar school hasn't taught perimeter and area. Well, of course we've taught perimeter and area, but you can't listen to those children when they tell you they've never seen something before. Just to be cognizant of the fact that, yes, if you let them revert, they will revert. Mm-hmm. And so the teachers really have to understand that they are in charge and that they are all working together and that they are responsible to each other. So the sixth grade teacher is responsible to the seventh grade teacher, but also the sixth grade teacher needs to respect what the fifth grade teacher has done. And if you get 1 year that's one teacher that's not on board, it can destroy the whole thing. It can go down. Those students will let it go downhill so fast. Say if you don't require hand holding, they will all be talking at the same time.
Hand raising.
Oh.
You were a different kind of teacher than we have nowadays.
It's like we're requiring hand holding in classes now.
It's new. It's new. It's kinder, gentler.
Okay, thank you for straightening that out. Hand raising. Raising one's hand. Okay, just move on.
Yeah, we'll move.
But I will say, I mean, I'm teaching 11th grade this year, and it is so nice to walk in those classrooms with those expectations already in place, right? I don't have to enforce hand raising because those kids have done it for 10 years. Now, I mean, if they start getting online, I'm going to.
But if you,
I could undermine it.
you
I could
could
absolutely undermine it.
That's right.
But there's so many habits those children have that have been, once they hit 7th and 8th grade, and those are some rocky years, right? Making those habits their own, right? They've had those habits, but they've always been supported. All of a sudden, 7th and 8th grade, okay, now those habits have to become their own. And then they get through 9th and 10th grade. By the time they hit 11th and 12th, like those habits are solid. Like they've made it their own. We're not, and so we really can do some really great, like have some great discussions, get some great learning done.
Because there's no distraction in the classroom.
It really is adult learning by that point, like because they've been so well trained and everything else.
But let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Because you've taught in the cottage school. And so we're talking about the full-time school, and it's much easier there because we have total control of the students. But what are the challenges in the cottage school if students are only going to school 1 day a week or 2 days a week? I think that's a whole different set of challenges to reinforce. And how do you get parents to reinforce what you're trying to do at home?
It is a totally different set of challenges, but it's the same principle.
It is.
It's just applying it. The challenge was not every one of my students was really writing legible cursive. Not every one of the students was had good habits of putting their homework into the agenda. And so I think it takes an extra level of communication with parents ultimately to be successful in any kind of hybrid program. And I found that with those students, what I needed to be doing was not just saying to the particular student who didn't have a habit of putting things in their agenda, you need to put this in their agenda, but also saying to mom and dad, this is what I told him to put in his agenda.
Right.
Will you make sure that happened? And I think that's the tweak that I would say in a hybrid school format is looping parents into that process of helping students to become more independent.
Because those parents, I mean, they want those habits.
Yes.
And if they don't know what's going on, but it's as you were pointing out, it's nearly impossible to get those habits formed in a 1 or 2 day setting because you need that additional support.
Right.
And so as long as they know.
It's got to be a true partnership.
So Tara, let's just imagine you got a chance to talk to all the 7th grade teachers and tell them what they needed to know to take care of your 6th graders that you have brought from kindergarten to 6th grade. I imagine some 7th grade teachers don't understand how hard of a transition this is, and others are way too loose on the students. What would be your challenge to those teachers' encouragement? What do you think that a really successful 7th grade teacher is going to do?
I have had this opportunity just this summer to talk to all the upper school teachers. I really think it's just transparency and telling them what we are doing, what we are requiring every time. And that is organization. I think that's a big part. Student behavior, going through, how to be a good student in the classroom, just civility, manners, responsibility, respect, those things. And then those study skills too, that we've been building all along. One of the things that's kind of a big change is in 3rd grade when they tell them, okay, we have a test. Every night on the homework board, it will say study for your astronomy test. But by the time they get to 5th grade, you just know there's a birds test and they're not going to tell you every night. So students have to be responsible. So I think just honestly telling the 7th grade teachers what these students are trained to do. And actually somebody from Memoria Press asked me for a list this week. Did you know that?
I told them to ask you, yes.
Asked me for a list of responsibilities by grade. I don't have that for him. But I can make it. And it was kind of exciting. I thought we don't have that anywhere. So you really do need somebody to communicate those things to you. And if a 7th grade teacher is brand new and they don't know what to come in and expect, just telling them what we've always done is, I think, the key.
So you're talking about transparency from kind of the administration side to the teachers in 7th grade?
Everything we are asking. I mean, this is, and
everything the students have done.
Yes. And we do that with curriculum. We will talk them through, okay, this is what they've done. But I just think having the teachers know where those students are coming from and what we've spent our time and attention on. They may not know, but we can tell them, you may not understand why blurting isn't an issue right away, but we're going to tell you we don't let them do that. So I just think being very clear with all that we've done is what is a help to those upper school teachers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what really helped me in that first year was I was in a spot where I was actually asked to go and watch all of the lower school classes and upper school. And so when I had time, I would just go hop in a classroom, and I spent a lot of time actually in 6th grade. And so I was able to see what those students were capable of. So I knew what my 7th graders should be capable of. And
in an ideal world, all teachers would have that opportunity to go visit the grade before and the grade after and see where they fit into that sandwich. But that's an ideal world.
So
You'd have to have a lot of subs.
I would encourage a school to have their teachers go and sit in. What would you be telling those teachers to look for? Because I think sometimes observations get wasted because the teacher themselves doesn't know what they're looking for or aren't motivated to look for it. So what would you tell them to be looking for?
We actually give a list when we have teachers. So, if we have a teacher that needs to go watch another teacher, this has happened to us before. We'll send them to that other grade and say, go watch, see what they're doing in the grade before you so you know how to behave with your students. The teacher will come back and go, that person has a really easy class and they're a great teacher. So then we made a form that says, go in and watch them. How have they planned? How is their board prepped? What are the key words they're using to get attention? What does their transition look like? So just giving them really specific things to look for. And then taking the time with them once they come out of that room to sit down and make sure they saw what you wanted them to see. Because it is really to go into Mrs. Colburn's kindergarten class and go, that was a great show. She's amazing. But you didn't see all the things that she had done in order to get that. So I think you send them in with what you want them to see. And then you spend time afterwards, checking what they wrote down.
One area we haven't unpacked much of that I think is maybe the last area, that is, what are we saying to parents throughout this transition? What does the communication look like? And how do parents respond to this transition from dependence to independence?
I think it's a little bit of legend now, the change from 2nd to 3rd and 6th to 7th. Like it's people know. Yeah, families talk, they know. But we do have a parent orientation at each of those transitions, and they come in and they sit with those teachers. So actually this Thursday night, 3rd grade orientation, we give them a little bit of time in class. And then we have all the parents come in and the teacher walks them through the day. And they say, this is what this looks like. These are the abbreviations for the homework board. This is what I'm expecting when when I tell you I want your child to write a little neater. They go through everything. Parents have the opportunity to ask questions, but it really kind of brings them in. And we'll do that with rising upper school students too, to just let them know what to expect. And what we really want to tell them is, you're not at the finish line. If you're a rising 7th grade parent, you're not done. Like you don't go hands off.
They're in upper school.
That you guys have trained them well. We appreciate that. And then we're just going to let them be. We're going to check their think wave every once in a while. And we hope it goes well for you. We just tell them it's not time. I don't know that it's ever time to fully back out and just be like, okay, we'll see what happens. But we try to tell them that there's a balance. You do have to let your students be responsible for themselves in a lot of ways and communicate with their teachers. But it's not a time for the families to back out and go, wish you well, see you at the end of the year.
Anything else that you two would be saying to parents about this transition?
I don't know if anything in particular comes to mind other than I've walked alongside parents that have, because they didn't see it coming or their oldest child particularly struggled, they were willing to quit the whole thing because that transition was too hard. Because they didn't, I think they were sort of that mind that they hit 7th grade and mom and dad don't have to be involved anymore. And that's when I was like, no. Like the support you're giving them is important because you're helping them make those habits their own. The teachers are helping them. This is a natural rocky moment. And they pushed through and it was phenomenal, for that child. But it if you don't see it coming, it can be a really, really rough couple years.
Well, I have one more question. Tara, what are you doing next week at 10 a.m. on Monday?
I'm pretty busy.
Because I think
busy.
we're going to vote Martin off the island. You're in.
I'm going to make sure Martin gets his luggage and gets back to town, this chair.
Tara will fly over to the Netherlands to go get that luggage.
I will, whatever.
Can we insert one more thing in here?
Sure.
I feel like this is also important in the homeschool world to transition your students. I think that it should also be a deliberate thought about what does your primary school look like at home? What does your grammar school look like at home? And where are you headed for high school? Especially if they're using the online academy, they are going to be more independent. But I do think the rules don't really change. And I think it's easy, having done it in high school, to really let or even middle school, if you're, to let your children just go do their homework on the trampoline or something. I just think I made some mistakes there that I think it would have been better if I'd kept a more formal school at home all the way through.
Yeah, it seems like the challenge in homeschooling would be the opposite of the school environment, in that the students tend to be more independent sooner, at least in terms of their schoolwork.
I think that's great that they do get more independent. And that's why homeschool students make such good college students, because they do know how to self-start and how to study. And, there's one teacher for multiple age students. It is totally different. But I do think some sense of order and rules, actual rules, which would be different than classroom rules, but still some rules are really important, because this is not just about getting the schoolwork done, but it is character building and learning how to be students. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Well, and Paul, do you think with the online academy that you encounter that with your teachers? I mean, starting classes in third grade, are those qualitatively different than your high school classes?
They are. I mean, the teachers are much more intentional about giving very step-by-step processes in those third, fourth, fifth grades. But, we because we're also not present, right? So like the online academy has a further disadvantage from the cottage school, because while we're teaching about the same amount of time in class, but we're not physically present in front of those children. We can't actually see what they're like. Even if we have a camera on them, we can't actually see what they're doing during class, which we don't have cameras on most of the time. But even if we did, we wouldn't be able to tell, because the camera's looking at them, not at their screen, not at what their hands are doing. And so we will tell parents, that early on, they, especially when that child's getting used to the online academy, that parent's gonna have to be right there alongside them, being that physical presence, helping them. And once they've got those habits established, then the parent needs to follow up. But I've talked to parents that have called us, well, my child's in high school, I want to enroll in as well. How is your child with making sure they get their work done? How are they being a self-starter? Because this isn't, you can't think about this like you're farming this out completely, but this is an aid. And so if you just need to know that as a parent, like, you're going to have to make sure your child gets on there at the right time if they're not that kind of child, if they don't have those habits instilled. So the classes are very different, but administratively, we try to make sure we talk parents through that, because some parents come to us in August, they want to enroll. We're happy to let them enroll, but we also try to warn them and say, if you're coming to us from a situation that's not working out and you're making this decision a couple of weeks before school starts and you're going to enroll in 7 classes, this is not, don't think about this like a brick and mortar school. It's not that way. And to try to help them at least ease into it. So oftentimes we'll recommend do 1 or 2 classes this year, next year come in full on, because you need that time to phase into it.
And to learn to be a teacher to your children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's helpful. This has been a great discussion. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Classical Etc. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider liking this video. If you want to join the conversation, then you can comment below. And if you want to stay connected, please subscribe to our channel. I hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll see you next time.